Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is the Breaking Free Show. And I welcome all of you here today. Thank you for joining in. I know your time is precious. And so I honor that and want to give you the most bestest show I can give you. And today is going to be one of those. And you know, I say that a lot, but I love the kinds of guests that we have on and the kinds of subject matters. And somebody says to me, "So what do you do on the Breaking Free show?" So we love to share a tool, a strategy, a technique, an idea, a philosophy, a person, a personal story, a mission, a place, anything that will free up the world, that will free us all up to live our most extraordinary life we can live, where we get along, where we connect, where we agree to disagree, and we still go forward. And today is going to be one of those days. But before we get started, I want to say hi to Amnon, who's our producer. Hello.
Hello, Marilyn. How are you?
I'm good. And you?
I'm just fine.
Have a good week?
Yes,
We have a
it's
routine.
cold. It's cold.
Oh, it's cold. It's cold.
Yeah,
It's a little nippy.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're
And
not
we're in the
used to that.
South.
We're not used to that.
No, no. And we're in North Carolina, so it's a little nippy. I'm not sure where all of you are from, but wherever you are, could be warm, could be nippy, could be frigid. I'm thinking
Yeah,
about you, right?
right. But it's fine.
But it's fine. We'll get along. We wear a little sweat and that's it. So let me just remind all of you that are listening, you are more than welcome to join our chat. It's a live chat, so put your name, right below the video to the right. You can put a nickname and join our chat. And you can ask questions. You can just talk with the other people in there. That's fine. Or you can call in anytime to the show whenever you like to share a story, a comment, whatever you feel inclined to do. That's 919-518-9773. And if you ever want to Skype in with us on voice, you are more than welcome to do that as well. So you would come in on computers, plural, that's plural, the number 2K voice. This show is for you, it's for me, it's for all of us. It's for us to grow, learn, chat, be able to make a difference in the world. So whatever you feel like being a part of the show, however you want to enter in, please feel free to do that. So today we have a really interesting show, and it's a personal thing for me, this today's show, and you'll know why in a minute. But we're going to be talking about this book, My Sister, Myself. Can everybody see that? And the author is Vikki Stark. She's a family therapist, and she has a wealth of knowledge to share. So let me introduce to you my guest, Vikki Stark. Welcome, Vikki.
Welcome, welcome me, and thank you so much for having me.
It's
And it's really a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure to meet Marilyn and Amnon, and to hear from soon to hear from the different viewers who might be sharing their thoughts and their questions with us. And I just have to tell you that I'm really not impressed with how cold it is there in North Carolina because I'm in Montreal and the
yeah,
temperature is minus 11.
and I can't
So,
even imagine.
yeah, of course I'm exaggerating it because I'm talking in centigrade, so it doesn't sound as bad in Fahrenheit, but we'll keep it in centigrade.
Well, it sounds cold to me.
It's cold. Believe
It's
me,
it's
it's cold.
cold. It's cold.
Even my dog is wearing boots. I'm not joking. My dog wears a coat, a sweater, and boots.
Well, that is a well taken care of dog,
Yeah.
right? So, Vicky, tell us about you. I could do that, but I really think it's always best coming from the person. So, tell
Sure.
everybody about you and your background.
Okay. So, as you said, Marilyn, I'm a family therapist. I'm living currently in Montreal. I'm from New York City. And I have a private practice in Montreal, and I run a counseling center where we have 30 different therapists working there. And so my career is sort of threefold. On the one hand, I'm a therapist. And on the other hand, I administer the Sedona Counseling Center. But on the third hand, I'm a writer. And so I've written, that's for people who have three hands. So I've written three books. My first book is the book that we're talking about that you showed today called My Sister, Myself. And my second book is called Runaway Husbands. And that's about wife abandonment syndrome. It's a book primarily for women about being left out of the blue from what the wife believed to be a happy marriage. Wife abandonment syndrome. And my third book, which is just coming out now, is called The Divorce Talk, a parent's guide to breaking the news without breaking their hearts. So that's for parents who are in the unhappy position of having to tell their children that they're getting divorced, and they really need to know how to do it the right way that will protect children.
Good.
So yeah, so that's pretty
Perfect.
much my career in a nutshell.
So first of all, I have to ask you where you're from in New York.
Oh, me, Upper
Yeah.
West Side.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens, went to school in Syracuse, lived in Manhattan. So we have a lot of
Where in
connections.
Queens? Where in
Bayside.
Queens? Bayside. Okay, because I grew up in Forest Hills.
Now this is really
Did
something.
you
But then
know?
I went to Barnard and I moved to
Okay.
Manhattan. And so most of my adult life, I lived on the Upper West Side. So
Did,
I say Upper West
did
Side.
you know family Somak in Forest Hills?
No,
Okay.
not that I remember.
All right. Well, here we go. So we have a lot in common. So I'm really interested in
We
getting.
have so much to talk
We have
about.
so much. I mean,
Yeah.
you all can't even imagine how much we have in common. But hopefully you're gonna be privy to some of that today. Well, you will
Right.
be. So I'm really interested in this book, My Sister, Myself.
Yeah.
And so take us into this book.
Okay. So let me tell you, first of all, why I wrote the book. I am, I've spent much of my practice working with families and working with women, and they've talked about their relationship with their sisters occasionally from time to time. And the book was sort of developed when my daughter, I have two daughters, and my younger daughter one night at dinner said, "No matter where I go, I feel like a little sister." And it was like, bing, like a light bulb went off in my head. And I thought, yeah, me too. I'm a younger sister. And wherever I go, I feel like the little sister. So that even if with a bunch of women who are younger than me, who are my students, I always feel like little Vikki. And I started thinking, wow, I wonder how that sister relationship, how that affects people in their lives. So I started asking my friends, who have sisters, what's it like for you? You're an older sister, you're a younger sister, how does that affect your identity? And it's the picture started becoming clear as to how having grown up as an older, middle, younger, or twin makes this indelible stamp on a woman's identity. And so I got really intrigued. And I started what I call the Sisters Project, where I interviewed 400 women, teens, and girls about their sister relationships. The youngest was a 4-year-old who has two sisters. And when I asked her, what's it like to have sisters? She said, I play with my sisters and then I hit them. And then I hug them. And I figured, well, that sort of sums it all up. We got the whole book right there in one sentence. And the oldest people in my study were 90-year-old identical twins. So, I really got a picture from having heard from women all over the world about what that experience is of being a sister. And I was really shocked at the different areas in our lives as adults that our position in the sister hierarchy affects our choices.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it affects things, and I'll just, finish this thought on this one thing. It affects things like what occupation you choose, what kind of partner you choose, how you feel about your own body. And that is all influenced by whether you're an older, middle, younger, or twin.
So let's start with one of these. And my mother's a twin, and many of you who have watched the show before have seen my mother on here because every summer she comes to North Carolina. She comes on as my guest on one of the shows.
Oh, how cute.
Yeah, it is. She's really fabulous, and she's a twin, and they have a very interesting relationship. And so I really want to listen to what Vikki has to say because I think a lot of it will pertain to what I've observed with my mother and my aunt throughout the years. But I'd love to hear from you. So on your book on the cover it says surprising ways that being an older, middle, younger, or twin have shaped someone's life, which I think is
Right.
So let's start with you spoke about the how it influences the men we choose or our body type. So pick something with us and get us started in that area, like whether it's body type or the men you choose or whether it's, being the younger, the middle, the older. Pick one of
Yeah.
those and start us off into this world
This
of
discussion.
sisters. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So you know what I want to start with is the hallmark of having been an older, middle, younger, or twin. And then just as an aside, I just want to mention that the book examines those four categories, but it also examines three other categories: bonded sister relationships, conflictual sister relationships, and caretaking relationships. And so it offers some suggestions as well. You know, if you have a conflicted sister relationship or a caretaking sister relationship, as to how, how you might break free of the roles that can be very restricting, and because nothing will hold you in your role other than something that you've been doing since the day you were born, since your early childhood. So, but if we go to the hallmark, let's say for an older sister, I mean, what most people expect is really very much true. That the older sister is often in a caretaking position, and she feels a tremendous sense of responsibility for her younger sister or sisters. And she can take on that role either because she loves that role and it fulfills something very profound and deep in her. One woman said she looked over the corner of the crib, over the side of the crib at her baby sister, and she said to her, "I swear, for the rest of your life, I'm going to take care of you." Like her heart was just filled with love towards her baby sister. So either the girl can take that role for herself, or she can be, tapped on the shoulder and told, "You're supposed to take care of your sisters, and that's your job." And she can do it reluctantly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's her as a child, very often having responsibility or having the fun of taking care of her younger sisters. But then as an adult, it puts her in a caretaking role that it's very hard for her to break out of. So that a lot of women who are older sisters say that even as adults, they're always taking care of everybody else. And they can never sort of sit back and let other people take care of them.
Can I
Um,
ask you a question? Like,
Absolutely.
so what, in a perfect world, what would a really good sister relationship look like?
I mean, when I interviewed the women who are under the category of a bonded sister relationship, you know what they did? They laughed a lot.
Mm.
They just laughing a lot. They knew each other from whatever. If we can just take a minute and I can just
Sure.
read to you if I can locate it super quick. Oh yeah, here we go. This is a perfect one. This is a quote from the book, and it's about a bonded sister relationship. And one woman said, "I go with my sister Sabine every September to Algonquin, which is a town in Maine, for a week, and we do nothing but scream and laugh and pee our pants almost. We have a ball in the car all the way, the same route every time, the same place, and there's really nothing to do there. We can't wait. We're like kids. We sleep at my mom's house the night before we leave, and we get up at 4 a.m. I'm sure my kids don't get as excited as this. We bring old tapes of singers we listened to when we were 17. We sing in the car, and we have to stop the car. We laugh so much. We dance in the car. We have a ball." So if you talk about the idealized image, to have somebody that you're so comfortable with, that you know so well, to have that intense love, bonded relationship, that somebody who was there with you in every step of your life, and who's a peer. It's not a parent, it's a peer. It's
Hmm.
pretty special.
Yeah, yeah. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, well, parents, it's have a big role to play in the experience of their children.
100%.
So, taking the pressure off of a child that, I mean, older children do babysit for their younger siblings and things like
Right.
that. But, what would, but I think that there's a fine line between what our children, do because it's, kids babysit for their siblings as opposed to, being the other parent.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's a term that a lot of older sisters use, that I had to be the surrogate parent,
Hmm.
and that they didn't choose that role. And it really, I suppose it always depends upon how available the actual parent is. Some of the women that I heard from were immigrant. They came from immigrant families. They came to the States, and their parents were working day and night. They had a convenience store or a corner store, and their parents were never home. And they had to take care of their siblings, and so it was a tremendous burden to be in that role. On the other hand, if you have a parent who's loving, there, and available, and is mature enough to really be able to parent effectively, then it's possible to be an older sibling and to get a lot of pleasure out of that role because you don't have all that burden and all that responsibility.
Mm.
Yeah, I remember one woman, an older sister, who said that she had to take care of her younger sister and brother in her childhood, and she was like 6 or 7, and they were like 2 and 4 or something. And she was terrified that something bad would happen to them while she was in charge. So that's obviously, a very inappropriate role for a young child to have that much responsibility. And so that creates this burden that, that older sister then takes with her into her adult life.
Yeah, I mean that's a very hard experience to take through your entire life as an adult to feel that burden, that fear. And I could imagine that prevents somebody from getting close.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. Because then you're always afraid, that something bad will happen and you'll be responsible for it.
Exactly. So, what other? I mean, I wanted to ask you some questions about my aunt and my mother because
Yes, we
they're
will. Let
twins.
me
But let's
quickly
go
go
through.
through the
Yeah,
hallmarks.
yeah.
The
Go
hallmarks
ahead.
for middle
Yeah.
sister. Middle sister surprised me. It was very interesting, how very clearly defined the middle sister role is. And if there was one word that defined middle sisters the most, can you guess what it is, Marilyn?
Hmm.
You're
Oh,
not going to guess,
well,
though.
I mean, I'm the middle sister, but I had two brothers, so
Okay.
I mean, the middle child kind of gets forgotten in some ways, forgotten at some point, and yet for me, that was a good thing sometimes. But
Okay.
I don't know. So you tell me.
Okay. So the word that I heard, I was very surprised about this, that a lot of middle sisters said they were the clown.
Oh.
They were joking around, they were the clown, they were the funny one. I found that middle sisters were closer to father and had more conflict with mother.
Hmm.
That middle sisters often got their identity from outside of the home, and not so much from within the home. They were more social, they tended to go outside. And middle sisters tend to have the most conflict with their youngest sister. There's a tremendous amount of jealousy between the middle sister and the younger sister. So those were just a bit of the tidbits of the hallmarks of being the middle sister, and then the younger sister is sort of as you would expect, is often in the coddled, indulged baby role, or could be the forgotten one. If the parents are very busy and there's too much going on and there's problems with the older sibs, that the younger sister is often in that position where nobody's giving her a lot of attention. But if there's a word that sort of describes the younger sister that I heard very often, it's powerless. Whether you're the adorable little thing and everyone thinks you're so cute, or whether nobody has time for you, either way, there's a certain kind of powerlessness that comes with the being in the role of the younger sister. So, what we have to do is then extrapolate these roles as adults, and see how that affects us in our daily lives. How, perhaps if you grew up in the very younger sister role, as an adult, maybe you feel as though you don't have a lot of sense of agency, that you don't have a lot of power. Now, for the twins, and this will be interesting for you, Marilyn, the twins have the whole issue of how much they want to play up the sameness and how much they want to play up the difference. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's a whole different world apart as to whether you're identical twins or whether you're fraternal twins. Mm-hmm. So I interviewed these two 13-year-old girls who were fraternal twins, and they said, and they looked really nothing alike. They really, they hardly even look like sisters. And they said, what's the point of being a twin if you don't look alike? They felt gypped. I want my money back. How come I'm a twin, but, they don't get to have any of the twin fun of looking identical? And so for the twins, there's often one that's called the reluctant twin. That one really wants to say, let's dress alike, let's be as similar as possible. And then the other one might be reluctant and say, nah, I'm okay. And that often for twins, there comes a point in their lives when they're in young adulthood where they have to decide, are they going to continue in this twin identity, or are they going to take this opportunity to sort of separate, go different ways, do different things, and really start to develop their individual identity?
Yeah, and I wanted to mention, because with my mother and aunt, and they're 90, and they were not in Vicky's book originally, but who
Nope.
knows? They are both extraordinary women. They're beautiful. They don't look 90. They're vivacious. They drive nice, cars. My mother has a little sports car. She's redoing a kitchen. I mean, they're amazing. But what I know, and I have not done the study as Vicky has, but just observing, my grandmother had them both put in the same classroom.
Yes.
They wore the same clothes up until and through the time they were married.
Okay.
So they did, and so it was very interesting because they do struggle with their identity on some level. My mother has one identity, my aunt has another, and even though in some ways they're very similar, they reject the similarness, if that's a word.
Yes.
So not to be similar. And
Yes.
then, and people do that in general sometimes. They reject something about themselves, even though it's who they are, but they don't know that that's okay.
Right.
And so they do. It's very interesting, the dynamics and how they argue.
Yes.
What they argue about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think as adults, one of the challenges in particularly being an identical twin, or even not necessarily identical twin. I mean, I've even seen it with brother and sister twins, is that you can never really find a partner who gets you the way your twin does.
Hmm.
And so, your primary emotional connection, your primary emotional relationship is with your twin. And then that sort of dilutes the relationship that you might have with a partner. And so that sometimes it can get in the way, and partners can sometimes be jealous, that really you're so much more relaxed, you're so much more yourself when you're with your twin. So it can get pretty complicated.
It does, and I think I just want to let all of you know that, I mean, we're talking about these situations and things that exist between siblings that could be, sister sister, of course, brother sister, whatever. But know that part of the reason for us bringing this up, and part, I'm sure, and with Vicky, is so that we are aware, because
Exactly.
awareness is power. I mean, we could be
Yes.
talking about all these things and go, "Oh, poor me," but we're going to get to a point where we say, "Okay, this is how we handle this." And knowing these things about ourselves. I mean, I was the middle child with bookend brothers. I mean, that came with a whole nother dynamic. And being the only girl, or, being feeling like I was the one in the middle, that, sometimes there was so much going on both ends, that I would remove myself.
Yes.
So there are things that we learn, and that we become maybe better parents. Maybe the awareness lets us know that nothing is wrong with our sister, or our oldest sister, youngest sister, middle sister. Just this
Yeah.
awareness is really important, and I commend Vicky for bringing this to the forefront, because these are things that we need to talk about. And Chris has a question here I want to ask you. So, how does
Good.
the birth order dynamic change when an older sister is disabled in some way?
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I suppose that leads me to the chapter in the book about caretakers. And very often it just turns the birth order on its head.
Mm.
So that even though the older sister is older, if a younger sister is in a caretaker role, or had been in a caretaker role when they were growing up, then it's, even though she was born first, she will no longer really strictly be, the older sister will no longer strictly be in the older sister role. Sometimes, I mean, it depends, of course, on the nature of the disability, whether it's if it's a mental disability or it's a physical disability. It's very possible for that older sibling to remain in that senior role, in the older sister role. But if she really needs caretaking from the younger sister, those roles are flexible and they can flip.
Mhm. Wow. There's so many. Isn't there so many things we want to know? So if you want to know anything besides me, I mean, sitting here writing all kinds of notes. So if there's
Yes.
anything that you all would like to know, please feel free to call. You might have be in a situation of your own, and you have personal experiences
Yeah.
that we may not ever have thought about. So please feel free to call in at 919-518-9773, or you can Skype with us at computers. That's plural 2K voice, and then certainly join the chat. So you mentioned early on, you
Yeah.
mentioned that it affects our body, it affects
Yes.
the men we marry.
Yes.
I'm sure it can affect a job, how we
Yes.
parent. So
Yes. Okay.
go
So this
ahead.
is what I found out, for example, with regard to occupations.
Yes.
What I found out was very, very clear that middle sisters tend to have more concrete occupations. They are the engineers, they are the computer scientists, they are the ones with the more black and white kinds of jobs. The younger sisters tend to have more caretaking positions. This is the therapists, the nurses, the doctors, those kinds of roles. And the older sisters tend to have more, let's say, positions where there is maybe perhaps more authority. So the one judge that I had in my
Mm.
study was an older sister. Many of the lawyers were like older sisters. So it seemed as though it was significant enough, that there was a clear delineation between the types of professions that women chose when they grew up that seemed to have a consistency with their birth order role. And then with regard to body image, very, very interesting stuff here.
Mm.
That we found that for the older sisters, what they were most concerned about in terms of the family was who's the prettiest. So that the issue of pretty, like middle sisters and younger sisters didn't talk that much about pretty. Like weird. It's just the older sisters were talking about who's the prettiest. So it was very interesting, that there was a difference there. And for younger sisters, they were the most insecure about their bodies, because don't forget they have two other sisters to compare themselves with. I mean, at least one, but in a family where there's more than two girls, they have one or two or three other sisters to compare themselves with. So the younger sister often is more insecure about her body, but the thing that she's most concerned about is who's got the biggest boobs. I don't know why, but that's what they wrote. They said, I was always concerned who had the bigger boobs. So for some reason that sort of came out to be like the biggest concern for the youngest sisters. And so, these kinds of things started popping up in the research, that just was really sort of quirky and different. Like, who knew?
I want to ask you, like, so what? Some of this is intuitive. I mean, you sit back and you think, it could make sense that an older sister would be concerned with even how she looks through youth, because
Yes.
here she is, she's getting older. Her younger sisters are still maybe a little younger to be
Yeah.
able to do certain things. So certain things, they do make sense. And I was just but the job thing. That's a little the middle child. What did you say about the middle sister again, as far as
Yeah.
the job?
They have like the concrete kind of jobs,
Uh-huh.
that they were more represented in fields like accounting, engineering, those kinds of fields that are more black and white.
I would also imagine that's and I'm it's curious because I would also think that the middle child would have been maybe as a middle sister would also be somebody who was a like a mediator, somebody who tried to keep things even
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of.
that's true too.
Yes, that's true
Yeah,
too.
yeah, we saw that. Definitely,
Okay,
we saw that.
okay,
It's a
great.
mediator, and just sort of along the lines of that, we also saw in twins they were also often concerned with social justice.
Why is
And when you
that?
think about that,
Yeah.
that's intuitive too, right?
Yeah.
When you think about that twins, they're used to things being fair. They're used to sharing. Sharing is very important for twins. And they're faced with it every day because their sisters are exactly at the same level that they're at, right? So twins tended to be the ones who were more concerned about world peace and positive vibes in the environment or that kind of thing. So that was sort of a surprising finding also.
That is very interesting. But
Yeah,
that also makes you. I can see that makes perfect sense.
yeah, yeah.
So there was. I just saw the movie Sisters.
Oh, you
Have
did.
you?
I didn't see it.
You haven't seen it?
No, what did you think of it?
Well, it's very. Well, it was a little goofy at times, but it's interesting because in their role, the younger sister always, for the most part, it seemed like she took care of the older sister.
Oh,
The
okay.
older sister was kind of out there and wacky, and the younger sister took care of the older sister, but yet they had this bond.
Yes.
They had this. They were terrific together. Having fun together, and when it was time for a little switch, for when the older sister really needed to take care of the younger sister, I mean, she kind of did that for a little while. It was very interesting, and the parents, you wonder when you see movies like that,
Hmm.
is there a therapist,
Yeah, who
behind the
advises them?
scenes?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the parents were extremely loving to each other.
Okay.
And so
Very interesting.
yeah, so you wonder if there was this bond between the sisters. Do you find that parents are loving, or do you find that that when the sisters have that bond, that their parents were not in the picture, so they had to bond with each other? What do you
Yeah,
find?
that's a great question. And what I found was definitely that in cases where there was a lot of difficulty in the family, where either the parents were divorced or in one case I worked, that I interviewed where there was a lot of illness. First the father was ill, then the mother was ill. Then that really contributed much more to the sibling bond, to the
Mm-hmm.
sister bond, because they had to, if they're divorced, they have to go back and forth, to moms and dads, or if a parent is ill, then they have to be together and they have to go to the bedside together. And so that, well, it can sort of work two ways. It can either contribute to the bond, or if there's not enough nurturing going around from the parental generation, it can make the sisters be very jealous of each other because
Mm-hmm.
they're both hungry.
Right.
So that what's taking place in the family can have a very powerful effect on whatever that bond is for the sisters. So it actually it works two ways. It
Mm-hmm.
works both ways.
And my husband is one of 9 children. So it's
Oh, wow.
him, 4 sisters, and 4 brothers. And
Okay.
they are a phenomenal family. It's
Hmm.
amazing to find a family of 9 children where they all get along and they're supportive and they just know how to be great. All of them, they're great leaders. They know, when which person steps in, when one steps
Wow.
out. It's really phenomenal, and they've always been extremely welcoming to the as a sister-in-law and so forth. And they were taught to play with each other. They were
Yes.
taught that they were, when all else wasn't there,
Yes.
they were there for each other.
Yes, right. And that's one of the things I found with the bonded sisters, that very often the parents made a rule about that. The parents said, you can't fight with each other. You have to hug, you have to kiss and make up. And that the parents were very clear about their expectations that the girls had to be close with each other. And I'll read you a really
Hmm.
cute little vignette about this role that the parents play. This one woman wrote, "We shared a bed for 5 years and a room for 9. So we had to get along or be miserable. One rainy Saturday, we were bickering all day, and our mom was sick of it. So she took us out in the backyard and gave us each a weapon. I had a wooden spoon, and my sister had a spatula, and told us, fine, if you want to hurt each other, go ahead and get it over with. I'll watch."
Mhm.
Of course, we threw down our weapons and started crying and saying how much we loved each other and didn't want to hurt each other. And we were hugging, and my mom looked at us and said, "Remember this." And we always did. I have to say, it must have taken a great deal of trust on her part that she knew that we would react the way that we did. So, that very often the parents are very clear about this. You have to hug, you can't go to bed mad, you have to make it up. And, obviously in some families that works, and in other families that doesn't work at all. But, for the bonded sisters, many of them said that their parents gave very clear directives.
Mm. So when you speak with adult women today,
Yep.
what, based on the information that you already know, is there something that you would, is there a way of summing something up or guiding women today in how, like I did a couple of weeks ago, I did a facilitation on leaning in.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, which kind of, when you think about it, it's about supporting, women leaning in to be leaders and,
Yes.
lean in. And one of the things that we certainly spoke about was supporting each other.
Yes.
These were not sisters, well, sisters in collaboration, I guess I could
Yes.
say. Leaning in, and to be careful not to post crazy things on Facebook or any of the other social media that is derogatory about another woman.
Yes.
We should not be I mean, we should not be doing that. And there have been things that I've seen that have been kind of funny, but that now
Mhm.
that I've taken a deeper look at these types of like leaning in and supporting each other, holding each other so that we, it's easier to lean in and become leaders and more of leaders when we're being supported.
Yes.
So what would you say in kind of bringing it around that women could do differently, or I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's sort of like what you said before, is sort of to develop this awareness of how our sister role growing up has affected us. And when you have that awareness, then it's sort of like it all clicks into place. You sort of see how, okay, here I'm whoever I am, but I'm always in my inner mind, I'm always little Vikki. And so that how I might respond with a particular kind of woman who's maybe an older sister, that I might be, behave in a different kind of way. And I think that when you can understand yourself and you can understand that position, it helps you break out of these restrictive roles. One of the big issues about my study was that, I talked with a lot of women who have conflictual relationships with their sisters. And this one woman said that she's an architect and she's a successful person, but she was the youngest woman in her family. And every summer she would get in the car with her two sisters and they would drive to their parents' cottage in the country somewhere. And where would she always sit? Where do you think, Marilyn?
In the middle.
In the back seat.
Mm-hmm.
She's the little sister. She's 45 years old,
Gotcha.
but she's still the little sister. And one of the things she said was that in the rest of my life, I'm a professional and I lead a team and I build houses and I do all this stuff. But when I get back together with my sisters, I'm still the little sister. And she said by the time they get to their parents' house, she's always crying. That her sisters say things that upset her and she's frustrated and she's crying. And she's stuck in that role. And anytime we get stuck in roles, it's not good.
Right.
So that if you become aware of how a role can be a positive thing, but that very often in sisters, the role is a negative thing. Either you're powerless, or you always have to be the caretaker, or you always feel frustrated that nobody's listening to you, or there are certain dynamics that continue to play themselves out year after year after year. And so the value of really acknowledging and recognizing what your role is as a sister is that it gives you the opportunity to say, okay, I'm sick of this now. 45 years is long enough. I'm sick of being the little sister sitting in the back seat. Now let me think through, first of all, what am I doing to contribute to being stuck in this role? And what are your sisters doing? I mean, obviously, we can only change our own behavior. And through changing our own behavior, which sometimes means having a conversation with a sister in a different kind of way, not in a whiny kind of little sister way, guys, you never listen to me kind of thing, but to have like a real serious conversation with your sisters, or maybe write them a note, write them a letter, or do something differently with them that makes you appear not so much like the little girl anymore, and that helps you break out of those roles. So, going back to the theme of your show, the breaking free, that those roles, they're very hard to break out of, but that women can do that. But it starts with first that awareness, that sensitivity to what those roles are. And one of the things that I feel gives validity to the fact that those roles affect a woman in their adulthood is what I call my sister's party trick. And since I wrote the book in 2006, I've been doing this, and usually I'm right. And which is that if I meet somebody at a party or wherever, I'm talking to somebody, and it's a woman and she mentions that she has a sister, I always say, don't tell me where you are, whether you're an older or a younger. And after talking to her for a couple of minutes, I can feel it. It pops into my head. I know. I say, you're younger, right? And she hasn't said anything about her sister, but that imprint is so strong that I can feel it. I know that she's a younger sister just by some intangible way that she's talking to me.
So,
So that,
yeah.
so that we want to break free of those roles.
So, so the role of of a sister, the sibling role is, and this might be a question that you cannot answer. I don't know, but
Okay.
is the sister role more impactful to us as young children, young beings, into adulthood, than the parent role, than our parents?
I suppose in each family it really depends. It depends upon what those roles. I don't think that we can sort of measure, but I think that through in psychology we've put so much emphasis on in the family of origin, in terms of what were your parents doing, what were your parents like? Were they warm? Were they punitive? Were they coddling? Were they, whatever? Were they permissive? What kind of parents you have. And we almost never talk to people about what was it like with your siblings? What was it? And for women, and, I was also interested in women who have brothers, right? But the women tend to measure themselves, compare and contrast with the sister. If she doesn't have a sister, then the brother role becomes more important. But if she does have a sister, I think the primary identification is with the sister, and then with the brother, maybe more secondarily. I mean, obviously, every family is different, but it's just fascinating to me that we have put so little exploration on these roles. And very often, if you think, if like I think of my own kids who are 2 years apart, in their childhood, they spent a lot more time together with each other than they did with me. I was working, or they were in school together, or they were on the school bus together, or they were, playing together in the basement. They spent a whole, bigger portion of their childhood with each other than they did with their parents. So that influence is it's pretty profound. It's pretty intense. But we haven't even scratched the surface in terms of how it affects us.
Yeah, I have two daughters. They're about 2 years apart,
Oh yeah.
and they, it's so interesting because I was divorced when they were young, and
Yes.
my oldest maybe a little bit remembers what it was like with her dad and I together, but my other one does not, and
Right.
so it was always, in a lot of cases, the three of us,
Yes.
but very much the two of them, and they
Yes.
have grown up to be still very close. They argue,
Yes.
but they can say things to each other that I can't. If I want to say something to one of them, I might say it to the other one to say it for me.
Right.
you know, because
Yeah.
if I say it, it's very different. And they're both mommies now, and it's just so interesting that they are they're very close, and yet I'm there's no and yet they're just really close, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we would, their dad and I was divorced, and they spent a lot of time together. They used to go to my mother and my father together for the summer. They spent a lot of time together, and
Sure. Yeah.
I did not show partiality to them.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't
Right.
know what I was doing. I didn't know what I wasn't doing at
Right.
that
So that
time.
you can see, you can see the intensity of their relationship and the intensity of their bond,
Yeah.
and as as close as they may be with you and with their dad, you can see that they just lived and breathed the same air
Hmm.
for so much of their childhood. That it's pretty profound.
Hmm.
It's a very important
Hmm.
relationship.
Vicki, I really want to honor you for doing the work that you're doing because, I'm not, we've spoke about this early on, and I don't like spending time in the yuck. I want us to
Yes.
acknowledge the yuck. I want us to
Yeah.
acknowledge, the things that aren't working so that we can, you know, help them to work. But it's so important in this type. When I turn the TV on and they're talking about um, restless leg syndrome, I don't care about. I think finding all these syndromes for me is just
Yeah.
it's everything can become a syndrome. But when
Right.
you talk about sisters,
Yes.
you talk about siblings, you talk about brothers, that affects my mother and my aunt's relationship has affected all of us.
Absolutely.
It's not just
Absolutely,
them.
Marilyn.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's so interesting about this? This is another element when I said, we sort of look at our roles and how we're slotted into roles, but it's also very telling, and another fascinating piece of information is that if you look at your mother's role vis-a-vis her sister or sisters. And I'll give you an example of that. As a therapist, I was working with a woman who is the oldest of three, and was always very, very responsible for her younger sisters, or sister and brother, because the mom really put her in that role. And the mother depended on her a lot to take care of the younger siblings. And my client was very frustrated with her mother because her mother was also very dependent on her. And so, they were all adults now, but the mother would want her to drive her someplace and needed her to come over if the plumber was there because she didn't want to be alone or whatever. She was constantly leaning on my client, and needing her to help the mom with all sorts of things that it seemed as though the mom could do on her own. And after a while, it sort of struck me, hello, I wrote this book about sisters. And I said, by the way, does your mom have sisters? And she says, oh, yeah, my mom is the youngest of 11. And it was like, bingo. Okay, well, that explains it. This woman spent her whole life with other people taking care of her and her not knowing how to do anything. And there was always somebody around to help her. And now she has an older daughter, and subconsciously in her cells, she's still leaning on the older daughter to take care of her. And so, when we learned that, then my client and I, we recognized that in a sense, you have to sort of cut her some slack. It's that the mom, she didn't know what else to do. That's her only, she'd never developed the skills. She didn't have to develop
Right.
the skills. There were always like, she already just had five parents around at all times. And so that she looked at her daughter in the same way, and that it can be very, illuminating about the truths of your lives if you start to look at the roles that even your mother took, or your role vis-a-vis your daughters. Do you identify, if you're a younger sister, do you identify more with your younger daughter? If you're an older sister, do you put more pressure on the older daughter? So that to sort of unpack all of these dynamic threads.
Family dynamics is so interesting, and I'm sitting here and I'm listening to Vicky, but I'm also at the same time, shh, don't tell her. I'm visualizing my family. I'm listening so closely, but yet I'm personally, and I would imagine many of you out there are doing the same thing. I'm visualizing. So my father was controlling, and my mother and my aunt were the youngest of four. So a lot of things were done for them. And so my
Okay.
father was that way. He would do a
Yes.
lot for my mother. And and he did a lot for me. So as a mother, as a young mother, I always I still say my daughters and I grew up together. At a
Yes.
certain point, we kind of learn how to, maneuver life. And so
Yes.
it's so fascinating to look back and say, we're not broken.
Yes.
This is so important. We are not broken. These things are like what Vicky just did. A duh. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, you know, here, these make sense because that's why she could look at somebody, listen to somebody, and she can hear the pattern because you are not broken. You are
Yes.
very much alike. We're all alike. That's why she can do that because she
Yes.
hears the things that we're all alike at. That we're not bad. And
Yes.
when you hear these things, then there's reasons for certain things, and
Yes.
right.
Yeah. And one thing that I do want to mention is that the our society puts a lot of pressure on sisters.
Mm-hmm.
We use sister as being sort of shorthand to say close female relationships, like you're my sister, right? And or that women is a community of sisters. But if you live in a family where you have a bad sister relationship or conflictual sister relationship, or it just eats your heart out, and seeing your sister always upsets you, or you're always fighting with her, then it can really make you feel like a loser.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel very sad, that you don't have the opportunity to have that sisterhood, that sense of sisterhood with your actual, biological sister. And so that, sort of along the theme that you're talking about, Marilyn, is that, I just really, really wanted to transmit the message that we can't expect that every sister relationship, as much as we may want it to be, that it can't always be ideal. And one of the things that, that I often noticed, with men is that if you ask a guy about his family and he says, well, I have a brother, but we don't get along, so we don't talk to each other, and so it doesn't eat his heart out. He just sort of says, well, that's the way it is. Me and my brother, we're sort of different. We don't hang out together. And it doesn't upset him so much. But if you say, ask a woman and she says, well, I don't get along with my sister and we tried and we went for counseling and, I sent her little Hallmark cards or whatever, if a woman doesn't get along with her sister, it seems to reflect more on her identity. And she takes it more personally and it hurts her more. So that, in some way, I think that for some women who have tried for many years to try to repair sister relationships, if they can sort of, again, I use the term cut themselves some slack, and let them say, look, I tried. Sometimes things can't be smooth. So you try to get along as best as you can for the sake of your family and for your parents, but that you don't have to blame yourself and you don't have to feel so badly, that you were unable to have a real sister bond.
Right.
Hopefully you'll have other close family and love relationships apart from your sibling relationship.
Absolutely. Cousins. I mean, that's a great kind of a replace, but I hate to say replacement, but sibling cousins can fill in very well, and wonderful girlfriends. There's a lot
Yes.
of. Oh, I'm not.
Vicky,
Yeah.
Yeah.
close your
Close the
blind
blinds.
a little, just a little bit more.
A little bit. Okay.
So we have some
That's good.
questions that I'm
That's good.
gonna relay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask Vicky from our chat, but Cindy is saying that she was the youngest of 8, and she was the one always doing for her siblings, and and that also transferred to her taking care of her mom as well. So
Okay.
that's probably pretty typical. And let's
She was
see,
the youngest of 8,
yeah, she yes, she was the youngest of 8.
and she was taking care of her siblings.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So, clearly there was something going on in that family that made it be atypical.
Hmm.
So that's unusual for the youngest to be the one taking care of the older siblings. But there must have been some dynamics in that family that sort of catapulted her into that role.
Hmm. Right. So well, we can go on and on and on, can't we? But I want Vicky to share about her book again, where you can find it, and all that juicy stuff. And don't go away because we have some more questions. But go ahead and just share, do some some marketing.
Okay, marketing. Yay. Okay, so we have a website. It's called mysister-myself.com. And it has more information and more stories. And of course, the book is available online at Barnes and Nobles and Amazon, and in Canada at Chapters Indigo. And so you can definitely, the book is available either in Kindle or in a paperback, so it's out there. You can get it. And there's lots and lots of stuff in there.
And then you do other types of things along speaking and that type of thing with
Yes, yeah.
okay.
I mean, I've also I do a lot of Skype and online therapy, and not online, Skype and phone therapy. So, I've certainly worked with women who have sister problems, sister relationships, all over the world. So if anyone is interested, they can go to my website, which is vikkistark.com, VIKKISTARK.com.
Perfect.
And so, if somebody wants to talk with me personally about their individual situation, I'd be more than happy to do so. And then, of course, just, as an aside, I have my two other books, Runaway Husbands, and that you can learn about at runawayhusbands, that's plural.com. And my new book, The Divorce Talk, How to Tell the Kids. And that's at howtotellthekids.com. So we got it all out there.
So you have daughters. Has how has their relationship been through, or how have you observed them through the writing of this book?
Well, I'm super close with my daughters. I mean, look, Marilyn, I mean, you and I seem to live parallel
Yeah,
lives
it's
because
freaky.
my daughters are 2 years apart and they were like two and a baby when I got divorced from their father. So maybe it's sort of similar to your story, and so my daughters have come with me through my long journey of life, and they're, very, very close. And they always give me their ideas and their suggestions about anything that I'm working on. They always have so much to offer. So, this they're fundamental to everything that I do.
It's so interesting, Vicky, because our we do have so many kind of connections.
I know
It,
it's sort of a little weird.
it is a little weird. I mean,
Yeah.
there's yeah, it's so funny to see and maybe that's just part of the part of why we're doing this is because Vicky and I have not, a lot of times I will have spoken to, my guests ahead of time,
Yeah.
and Vicky and I did not do that this time. And so
Yeah.
it's so interesting because it just goes to show you that women can connect
Yep.
no matter what.
Yep.
You know,
That's for sure. It's unbelievable. It's amazing.
it is amazing. And,
It is. It's amazing.
and you have a sister, is that correct?
I do have a sister.
And I have no sisters. I
Yeah.
have sister-in-laws. I have brothers.
You know what my sister's name is? Nikki.
Oh, really?
Nikki and Vicky.
Wow. And how far apart were the two of you?
5.5 years.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
I was only recently, I don't know, somebody keeps Skyping me, so I don't know why. If you hear that beeping, I'm trying to get rid of it. It was only recently that I realized that it's weird to be called Nikki and Vicky, have identical names with only one letter different. So
Mm.
it's only, I just figured that out now.
Just
See,
now.
there, you can always learn.
Yeah,
There's
you
always
can
more to learn.
always learn, and with an open heart and with
Yes.
curiosity, there's so much that we can accomplish. And so, in kind of parting for this
Yeah.
show, what wisdom would you share with the women, with the men that might be listening who are married to women that have sisters? I mean, that's a whole nother ballgame we haven't even spoken about. But
Right.
what
Yes.
parting wisdom, words of wisdom, would you share?
Definitely, I would say, please think about your sister relationship. Don't take it for granted. Maybe put a little muscle into it. Think about how you can improve it. And one of the things that people have told me is that they bought the book and they read the book and they wrote in the margins, oh, this is what happened with us, and this is just like us, or this isn't like us. And then they gave the book to their sister, and their sister wrote in the margins. And then they got together and they looked at the book and they sort of unpacked it together. So, to do something special with your sister if you can, and to really try to celebrate that bond that really lasts a lifetime.
Beautiful. I think I would totally agree, and I would say that anything is possible.
Sure.
And when we look at creating or soothing a relationship or creating a bond, creating some peace. We're not talking about having to be miles long.
Yes, right.
Every step,
Yes,
right,
true.
is
Yeah,
important. So
yes,
and it can be done. It could be where, one time you look the other way.
right.
That makes a difference, you
Yes,
know, or whatever, or you look the right way.
yeah,
you know, right? Anything is possible, and it can.
right.
I mean, peace can happen anywhere, and to examine a little bit with love, examine with love where you are, where your sister is, with forgiveness.
Yes,
Knowing that it's coming from someplace, and it's not with horns. So
yes.
I want to thank you, Vikki, for sharing today and for bringing this topic up and out.
This was so great. Thank you so much, Marilyn. It's been a real pleasure.
It sure has. I thank you so much for being here. And I think you're going to see Vikki some more, so be on the lookout.
Okay.
And if I can be of any help to any of you out there, please let me know, Marilyn at MarilynShannon.com. You can go to my website, MarilynShannon.com. And I would love to help you. I'm in the process of writing a book about men. So if you have a man in your life and, like to share about what it feels like to be an emotional man in this world, please let me know. And with that, I love you all. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you all next week for sure. Bye bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.